Well, good afternoon, and welcome to our continuation of our Bible study on Jesus's parables. Today I have three of them. We'll see how far we get. They're kind of all related. You'll see kind of the theme as we get going. The first one is Luke 18, 9 to 14. Luke 18, 9 to 14.
Luke 18, 9 to 14.
Okay, so everybody find it? Someone want to read that? Luke?
Yeah, I'll read it.
Okay.
He also told this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and regarded others with contempt. Two men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee, standing by himself, was praying thus: God, I thank you that I am not like other people, thieves, rogues, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give a tenth of all my income. But the tax collector, who's standing far off, would not even look up to heaven, but was beating his breast and saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you, this man went down to his home justified rather than the other. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, but all who humble themselves will be exalted.
Okay, so now we have Jesus talking about two different types of people. The Pharisee, which we know are the leaders in Israel, they're usually the most respected, honored. They felt very righteous. They had a self-righteousness about them, felt they were above others, and they tended to be very judgmental of others. They thought they were better than people, and they thought that they were the ones that followed all the rules and that they were without judgment themselves, that no one could criticize them. So here we have so what is the Pharisee saying? What kind of prayer is he praying?
I'm so great. Oh, thanks God that I'm so great.
Very humble, right? Very humble.
I'm not like others.
Real humble.
Yeah, kind of like tooting his own horn here. I'm so wonderful. I'm so great. Look at me. Oh, and I'm not like that guy over there. He's bad. I'm much better than these other people, right? So it's not really. He thanks God that he's not like them. He doesn't thank God that he has his health or he has money that he can tithe or that he is well respected. He doesn't thank him for any of that. He thanks him that he's better than other people. What what do you think was going on there? What kind of person would pray something like that?
A very self-involved person. Somebody who is not tolerant of others, who doesn't see the positives in other people, only the negatives, and who has contempt for them, for other people.
I think he
Right.
kind of putting himself on a par with God too. It was like, I follow all the rules. I did all, this is what I'm, he's kind of like, I don't know. He seems to be talking to God like he talked to a friend, oh, look what I did and I'm really great. And not like God. There doesn't seem to be respect or awe or thankfulness.
I think that, oh, go ahead.
And
Oh, done.
I think though that it's almost like a matter of like a social class issue here too. The Pharisee is probably have been brought up in, great, nice homes. They got all their religious training. They got bar mitzvah and all this other stuff. And they had maybe good parents that taught them, right from wrong and everything. I think the problem is when he groups that, he says they trusted in themselves and they were righteous and they regarded others with contempt. I think the problem is that they regarded others with contempt. I mean, if you think, you can thank God I had good parents and I was brought up okay, and I haven't been arrested yet. But maybe I think the problem is that he's contemptuous, that how come these other slobs over here, couldn't do what I did. It almost rings a little bit today of how people think today of where your status is and what your background is. Sometimes we're very lucky to be in the position that we're in, but we don't want to regard other people with contempt,
Right. So he wasn't saying, I mean, it might have been more acceptable had he, or to our ears anyway, if he had said, "Dear Lord, thank you that I am in a position that I have wealth and power
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and I'm respected and I'm I have a good place in society. Thank you. Thank you for letting all that happen." But then
Right.
he has to add on there, "And I'm so much better than everybody
Yeah,
else."
that's the issue. That's what I see as the problem.
Yeah, he couldn't just leave it at that. He had to go on and make it that he was better than everybody else. Okay. Um, and this comes right after a story about an unjust judge. So here Jesus is trying to get them to understand that everybody should get a fair shake, and that that God sees everybody, not just the rich and powerful and those that have a better place in society. That God cares for all people, no matter where they are. So now we have the tax collector, right? Which were
Before,
Go ahead.
Can I-
Yep.
I also think that he kind of feels like he deserves this. He says, "I follow
Yeah.
the laws, I do the thing. I'm doing these good works, I give the money, I do these." So that's why
Yeah.
I'm not a
Better.
thief, not anything. It's like I paid my dues. No, you didn't. God gave you these things.
Right. Right. And you'll see this theme in our story of the Good Samaritan. Same thing. What do I need to do to inherit? Oh, I follow all the laws. I'm a good Jewish person. I read scripture. I'm good. I'm good.
Mhm.
And then, there's several of these stories where Jesus says, "Yeah, but do you do this?
Right.
Do you care for others? Do you give away some of your money? Do you, And they're like, "Oh, whoa, wait a minute." They won't go that extra step. They'll take on the they're very prideful, and they'll take on the glory that they get from whatever they think they've done, and their status in society, but they won't accept some of the responsibility that maybe comes with that status and with that wealth. Um, yeah. So the tax collectors, what were they? What was their status in these times?
Not good. I mean, they had to collect something from everybody, and especially those who didn't have, an extra piece of wheat to give, a coin. They but it's a job that he had to do. I mean, to live, to exist.
Right.
But
You had to work.
he was not looked upon very nicely.
Well,
No, they
also,
work. Tax collectors work for the Roman government, which a lot of people hated. So right away, you're working for the enemy. No matter what you're
Yeah.
doing, if you work for the Roman government,
Can't win.
people didn't like you. And now on top of it, you were a tax collector, and you went around asking money from people who, again, many did not have a lot to give. And the problem was also is that they were thought of as very unsavory, as cheaters, because many of the, when they didn't have the bookkeeping systems they have now, or the record keepings, they would say, "You owe me $100, right?" And nobody really knew, is that really what they owed? Did they owe 80? And so they'd pocket the 20, give 80 to the Roman government and keep the 20. And so a lot of these had like a little stash on the side, and they would go around, and if they thought someone was able to pay it, they'd up the ante so they had a little more money for themselves. And there was no real bookkeeping, no recourse for a lot of these people. They just had to do what, they would go around maybe with an armed guard, and they were like, oh yeah, I gotta pay. They, it wasn't like you got a bill in the mail and you paid it and you had a recourse. There was not much people could do, so they were very oppressive to a lot of people in the town. So they had an extremely bad reputation, the tax collectors. First of all,
Wasn't
nobody wants to pay their taxes, just like we don't want to pay our taxes now.
Wasn't that a law too, through the temple or through the Hebrew law, that they couldn't have dealings with them and they couldn't eat with them? It was like unclean to eat
Yeah,
with
they
them.
were considered unclean, like a lot of other, it was not an accepted profession, even though, Janice was saying somebody had to do it. And if you got to work and that's the job, you got to do it. Now, some probably went into it because of the extra earning potential that was available.
For sure.
They were willing to live with a bad reputation and to be thought of as unclean and outside of the norm of society because they were making extra money. So some people were willing to accept that risk and that, blemish on their character. But we have this man, so he's a tax collector. We're really not sure. Does he cheat? How much he cheats? We don't really know what his story is. But his prayer, what does he pray for?
He praying to God to be merciful to himself, because he's not he's a sinner. He's admitting he's a sinner. So he's asking God to be merciful to him, forgive him.
Right. He doesn't say, "Hey, I'm only doing my job."
No.
I got to do what I got to do. People don't understand me. He doesn't make all excuses. He beats his chest, and says, "God, be merciful. I made mistakes. I'm a sinner."
Yeah, it says he couldn't even look up to heaven. He couldn't even.
Yeah.
So he felt bad. He felt guilty. He felt shame for what he did. Now you might say, well, you don't have to cheat. You could fix that, but we like I said, we really don't know his circumstances. We don't know, maybe that was the only way they made money, was by skimming a little off the top. Maybe they didn't get paid. The government might have said, well, you skim off whatever you can skim. And you have to give us this amount at the end of the week. If you collect more, well, good for you. That's your pay.
Were they forced
really
to do that? Were these people forced to be tax collectors by the Roman army, or the Roman government? In other
I
words,
don't
they
really know. I don't think so.
don't
I
know
don't
the
think they
history.
would come and force you, but they may be forced by the fact that maybe they couldn't do anything else and that was the only job. Yeah, I'm not sure. How
Oh, yeah, I
people,
don't know the history either. If this was, they say, hey, we're getting you, you're doing this,
yeah, I've never heard that they were forced to do it.
Okay.
But they may have been forced because they had to make money and that was the way to make money, that was how they could do it.
Steady paycheck.
Steady
Yeah,
paycheck.
they need a paycheck and this was the paycheck.
Okay.
Yeah. But anyway, so two different prayers, right? Two different walks of life, two different prayers. What does Jesus have to say about these men?
You're saying somebody like the tax collector who admitted that he was a sinner, rather than, praising himself. Jesus is saying everybody who is like that, who admits that they have faults, they can be humble. They're humble. But everybody like the Pharisee who says that he's perfect and he does everything perfect, they're not humble people. And rather, I think Jesus appreciates somebody who is humble rather than like the Pharisee who's loves himself.
Right. So he doesn't criticize either of them, right?
No,
They both are telling their own truths. It's just one is all wrapped up in his own head that he's so wonderful, and the other one realizes that he's done wrong, and is willing to face the consequences and willing to admit it. And so Jesus points out to them that the one that, even though you all think the tax collector should be the bad guy in this story, I'd rather eat dinner with him. He's the one that's justified. He's the one that should be exalted, because he at least recognizes that he made a mistake and is willing to ask God for mercy. Whereas the other one didn't recognize that he had done anything wrong. And I'm not saying that the Pharisee was a bad guy, but how many of us are perfect?
No, we're all-
But no, we're all, but does he stop doing what he's doing? Or does he says, or does he just say, well, I'm sinning, I'm sinning, Lord, please have mercy, but you know what, I still have to work, still have to do this job.
Oh, I think he's still a tax collector. Yeah, I don't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not like Zacchaeus where he turned around and said, "Oh my goodness, I'll pay everybody back that I might have cheated."
Right.
I think this guy's continuing on. And
Yeah,
again, Jesus was living in the times. He understood the pressure and he understood what was going on. He didn't like it, I'm sure, but he was tackling things as he could tackle them. He was trying to tackle the oppression. He was trying to tackle the unfair and the unjust things that were going on. And he would point that out, many times. But those that got caught up in it and had to be part of it, like he would say when we talk about the one, well, whose face is on this coin, right? Caesar's. Well, then pay the taxes to Caesar. Like he was not concerned with a lot of those earthly monetary things. He understood what's wrong. I mean, there's lots of stories of him sitting with the unclean people, the tax collectors, the sinners, because that's who he felt got it. They understood that, yeah, they made mistakes and they needed God and they needed to have mercy and they needed to be forgiven. So Jesus would rather hang out with those people than with the ones that thought they were all pious and did no wrong and never made any mistakes, because they were just too fake for him. He didn't want to have to be bothered with all their pomp and their big heads that that they thought they were all that.
Well,
So with this, go ahead.
Jesus sought out the tax collector, didn't think he was a bad,
Right.
didn't necessarily think he was corrupt. I mean, you can be a tax collector without being corrupt. But didn't he take one of the tax collectors to be his apostle? Wasn't Matthew a tax collector?
Yeah, so he got, like I said, he understood, he got it. And he understood that they're people like everybody else. They have a job to do, they do their job. There can be good and honest everything. We were just talking about, Joe was talking about having his anniversary for serving as NYPD. There are good cops, there are bad cops. There are good tax accountants, there are bad. There are good pastors, bad There's good and bad in every single profession, every walk of life. There are people that abuse their power and people that stand up for others and humble themselves. And then Jesus got that. And so he sought out those. You know, the last line is, for those who exalt themselves will be humbled, but all who humble themselves will be exalted.
But the other thing too, Pastor, is that the Pharisee, he's one of the chosen people. He's God's chosen people.
So's the tax collector, if
well,
he's Jewish,
Yeah,
doesn't matter.
well, that's true. But according to all the laws, I mean, Jesus really does he's really throwing out a lot of Jewish tradition and law by saying he's bringing everybody in, which was probably not the thought of the day. The thought of the day was, we're the Jewish people, we're the Hebrews, we're chosen by God, we have to follow these rules.
Separate us.
God has screwed it, will punish us if we don't.
Mm-hmm.
So the guy does feel, hey, I'm righteous, I'm part of the chosen people.
Okay.
Unless there's snow, what happens, like if you have
Excuse me a
cancer?
second.
I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
Okay,
Yeah, I'll call you if we cancel, but I doubt it.
Sunday I'll be with Hertz in Manhasset.
And have fun. Sorry,
Chosen
that was
people.
our new vicar. You'll get to meet her next week.
Okay.
Ah,
And lost my train of thought.
No, chosen people, I was saying that.
Yes.
Is
Yeah.
it chosen?
So Jesus's whole ministry was about trying to get people to rethink who God's people are, trying to get them to realize that, well, if God is involved in creation and Adam and Eve and the first people and, carrying on the generations and all the births, well, then isn't everybody that's a human created by God, and shouldn't all they be in God's image and, all part of God's world? But people, if you look through the Hebrew scriptures, the way a lot of it was taught and accepted at the time was that, God comes first to the Israelites and to God's chosen. And then maybe some of the other people get some stuff too, but mainly. Luke's gospel in particular is one where he pushes continually the limits and the boundaries. He continually has you'll find a lot of these parables and a lot of these stories where he crosses boundaries. He goes towards the other, including the other, expanding the vision of who God's chosen people are. And that, okay, even if maybe God came to you first, doesn't mean that God stopped there. That was just first, and there's second, third, fourth, there's on and on and on and on. So, and in these stories with the Pharisees, he's challenging them to realize that, yes, you're important in this society and you've earned, certain respect and whatever, but you can't go putting everybody else down, and you can't, think that you're better than everybody else just because of who you are. It takes, he understood that it takes everybody to make a society work. It takes the tax collectors, it takes those at the very top of what society thinks is the top job, and those that are at the very bottom of what people assume are good jobs. It takes everybody to make a society run, and everybody is part of God's beloved children. And it was a tough message. That's why a lot of these parables have very similar themes about including, about accepting, about not thinking you're so much better than everybody else. This guy is one that, there was an old saying, all that in a bag of chips. Like he thought he was, like such a, so much better than everyone else that they didn't have to bother with people. We had the Good Samaritan story where they walked past like, well, I can't be unclean for To go to temple, I can't touch someone that's might be bleeding or might be hurt. I can't do that. That's beneath me. Um, so he continually challenged, who is my neighbor? Who is accepted in society? The whole class issue on who's better than others, continually tried to break those boundaries in his ministry. And speaking of that, let us move on to Luke 14. Actually, it's backing up again a little bit, I guess. And we'll look at another parable. Luke 14, 7 to 14.
When he noticed how the guests picked the places of honor at the table, he told them this parable. When someone invites you to a wedding feast, do not take the place of honor, for a person more distinguished than you may have been invited. If so, the host will invite both of you will come and say to you, give this man your seat. Then humiliated, you will have to take the least important place. But when you are invited, take the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he will say to you, friend, move up to a better place. Then you will be honored in the presence of all your fellow guests. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbled himself will be exalted.
Wow.
Yeah,
Same
so here
word.
we have the same wording, right? He who humbles himself will be exalted. They who exalt themselves will be humbled. So here's the story of seating, right? Place sittings. If any of you have done a wedding or any kind of fancy affair where you've had to make name cards and place people, right? We know it's very stressful, right? Very stressful on who do you sit next to who. Oh, this person maybe is fighting with that person, and we can't have one cousin at a special table and the other cousin back by the bathrooms. Like you have to try to get equal and try to make it, so that no one feels slighted and the thing. And it can be very, stressful. In Jesus's day, the practice was of seating the guests by rank and by distinction, right? So the most important people in town, most important guests would get the seats, the best seats, wherever they were, the best seats in the house. But they usually would arrive last too. The important people wouldn't be sitting around. They would come in like with grand fanfare, and they would make an entrance and they would come in, right? So if you got there early and you were not aware of this, or you just weren't paying attention, you might say, oh, look, the seat next to the host is available. I'm going to sit down and talk to my cousin or whatever. And then in comes the mayor or somebody that's important, and they would say, oh, no, get up. You need to move, right? So it would be embarrassing, right? And it was, they would try to, make sure that, if you watch any of these shows with, I used to watch Downton Abbey, and any of those, old shows that talk about status, there was always a big thing about who sat where, and, visiting dignitaries and things like that. It was extremely important. And so here Jesus is saying, instead of taking like the best seat, take an average seat, take a seat at the table over there, the other end of the table. And then if the host so desires or whatever, then they'll move you up. Be a little more humble. Don't assume that that you needed to be in the best seat. What do we think about this practice?
Well, I had a very odd experience once when my husband was still alive. Well, it's 11 years ago. We went to a bris for twins. So my husband couldn't walk well and everything. So we're sitting at the dining room table. Yeah, we had our little food, and we not realizing and not knowing that the moral was going to do the bris right there.
Oh,
So we're sitting at the table in the place of honor, And I told my daughter's friend, your mom should be here. You want us? No, 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 you stay here. You're like parents to us. Mr. Corona's, like my dad, Okay, but I felt so strange sitting right next to where they were doing the twins, and it was, and the parents and the grandparents are all sitting in the audience, and you were sitting there like, and we're Christian and not Jewish. And it was like, the whole thing was a little weird, but in the end, it didn't make a difference really, but she really wanted us to stay and not get up and move while she was setting up. No, no, you stay. It's okay, And it was like, okay. We weren't looking for the place of honor to be sitting.
Right. You just needed a place to sit because you couldn't hold your plate or whatever. Yeah. Yep. Those things that happens, and you felt awkward, right?
Yeah, oh, very, very. But it went over okay, but my daughter's friend was like, you stay here. I said, well, get up, don't move,
Yeah.
And she wouldn't let us. So, but it was the same type of scenario almost, where the place of honor, and we didn't mean to be in the place of honor. That was my part, because
Right.
we were just guests. So,
Well, why would the Christian think that this was going to be done at the dining room table?
right?
Right?
That's right. I learned a lot that day.
There you go. Yeah. So that's an interesting, thing. I had a situation once where I was asked to move. I was at St. John the Divine, the big, huge Episcopal cathedral in Manhattan. And I was there when I was in seminary, that a lot of my classmates were Episcopalian, and they ordain their students to be deacons first, and then they get ordained as priests. So this was a big ordination for all the deacons that were in my class. And so I went to this big, thing in the thing, and I was, looking for, somewhere to sit, and one of my classmates that was actually going to be ordained that day said, "Oh, sit here. It says visiting clergy." And I was doing my internship at the time, so I was a vicar and I had my collar on. And I was like, "Oh, okay." So I sat down, right? And it was up front. And I was like, "Are you sure?" "Oh, yeah, no. Okay, fine." So I sit down. And then in comes the procession of all the people. And I'm sitting there, and one of my other classmates is like, "Yeah, get up." Like, this is where, like, the vested clerk, whatever, we're sitting. I was annoyed because I was like, really not called for. It didn't really matter if I was sitting with these people or not. But anyway, I was like so embarrassed. So now I have to get up, and everybody's looking, and I'm like crawling out of this place. And to boot, I wound up sitting all the way in the back because now all the other seats were taken. Whereas I was there early, I could have got a decent seat in the back, which I was going to do, but they were like, "Oh, no, sit here." That
Yeah.
was like bad experience. I'll never forget that. So now I'm very wary of when I go somewhere where to sit. But it's embarrassing, I was
Yeah.
like, "Oh my goodness, this is bad." Um, but yeah, places can become, very, very touchy and very, that's why if you notice lots of times that when there's like free seating at a place, people will kind of mill around, right? To wait to see, okay, well, who's sitting somewhere else, and so I could take a seat. Um, and so Jesus was doing this like reversal. He liked to reverse the roles, right? Of getting the lowly lifted up. And so here he was saying, like, don't exalt yourself if custom or tradition calls that you should be a person sitting up closer, like, let someone else make that call. Don't you decide that you're the most important guest at this affair, and move forward. um so again, the same exalting and being humbled thing. Who read that? Janet, you want to read from 12 to 14?
And Jesus said to his host, when you give a luncheon or dinner, do not invite your friends, your brothers, or your relatives, or your rich neighbors. If you do, they may invite you back, and so you will be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed. Although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous.
And what does he mean by that? Now, let's face it, we don't do
No, we don't.
that. We don't do that.
We don't go out on the street and invite, right?
So there must be something that he means just, unless it's a public party that everybody's invited and,
Well, I think
I was-
part
I
of the
was-
point. Go ahead.
I was just thinking of the banquet that Gloria Day used to have every Christmas. There was like almost 200 people, and they were of all, you know, either some of them were blind, were not blind, but they were of different assortments, and they could never repay us back. And
Right.
so I think we were blessed by doing that because, you know, we weren't looking for a repayment. We were just looking to give them a decent meal because they were probably didn't have a lot.
Right. So I think
that's a good example, Joyce. I think that's, and
that's a great example. And I think that's part of the point is, I don't think he was saying like you can't ever have your sister over for lunch or something. He was saying, he was talking more for these big parties. People would put on these lavish things and show off their wealth and show off, how important they were. And well, I have so many servants and look at the china I have and look at, I'm serving this type of meat. Maybe I have, better livestock than you have or whatever. And a lot of it was to show off and to show that, that they were like higher in society. And they would invite, again, the top echelon, the cream of, the other movers and shakers in town. And, they would just invite each other, right? To their, because they were the top class. And so he's saying, well, don't always invite people that are going to be able to pay you back. Sometimes like Joy said, invite the neighbor that maybe needs a meal, or invite someone that can't necessarily pay you back and invite you to their house. That there is reward in that. And he's saying you'll be repaid at the resurrection. Again, he tries to reverse everything. And this was also kind of, like a metaphor for those who didn't receive Jesus, right? Be humble. A lot of people that thought a lot of the Jewish people that thought they were stuck in their ways and they knew all the laws and they were following and they knew what the Messiah should look like and Jesus wasn't it. And they just wouldn't accept him. He tried to contrast with those who were humble enough to say, you know what? Maybe my image was wrong. Maybe I need to change what I thought a Messiah was. Maybe I need to change what my idea of a king is to accept Jesus as the Messiah. So, some of it is kind of tied into that being humble enough to recognize that, maybe I need God's help to get through this, to can't always stay secure in my own beliefs and always do what I've always done. Sometimes you need to break out of that a little bit and expand your vision of things and of how the world might be. Because Jesus was throwing a lot of reversals at them, a lot of turning the world upside down, of making them think about what they do, how they pray, what they're thankful for, who they invite, who they welcome, who might be an outcast, if anyone. And lot of it was aimed at these people that just wouldn't expand their view of who Jesus might be. And so a lot of that was challenging that when he talked about the being humble, recognizing, like the first tax collector, recognizing that you need God's grace, that we sin and then we make mistakes, and that's okay to ask for forgiveness and to ask for God's help with some things. So our last story here, we'll get it started and we'll see how far we go. Is actually follows right after here. It's the parable of the great dinner, 15 to 24. Someone wants to read that.
15, 24.
I'll read.
Okay.
One of the dinner guests, on hearing this, said to him, "Blessed is anyone who will eat bread in the kingdom of God." Then Jesus said to him, "Someone gave a great dinner and invited many. At the time for the dinner, he sent his slave to say to those who had been invited, 'Come, for everything is ready now.' But they all alike began to make excuses. The first said to him, 'I have bought a piece of land, I must go out and see it. Please accept my regrets.' Another said, 'I bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I'm going to try them out. Please accept my regrets.' Another said, 'I've just been married, and therefore I cannot come.' So the slave returned and reported this to the master. Then the owner of the house became angry and said to his slave, 'Go out at once into the streets and lanes of the town and bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame.' And the slave said, 'Sir, what you ordered has been done, and there is still room.' Then the master said to the slave, 'Go out into the roads and lanes and compel people to come in, so that my house may be filled. For I tell you, none of those who were invited will taste my dinner.'"
Okay, so here he's kind of the thing happened that he was just talking about, the hospitality, right? Opening up to others. So who does he at first invite, right, to this party? He's having a big party at his house. Who does he invite?
His peers, his equals.
His peers, his equals, the one that he's probably been to their houses, been to their parties. So he invites them as payback, as, okay, you come to my house now, right? And so instead of saying yes and saying, "Oh, love to come, wouldn't that be nice?" It was often custom that they would send someone out to remind people, right, that this was the party and this was the time. Come, everything's ready, right? Dinner's ready. Come along to the house. And so, what do the people say?
They all have excuses.
Right. And they're like lame excuses, right? And the excuses would have been laughable to the people hearing this. They would have been like, "What? That's a ridiculous excuse. I bought land, so I can't come. What does that have to do with anything? I have to try out the yoke on my oxen. Like, I can't do that tomorrow. Like, I have to do that right now. This has to be done immediately. I'm married and, I cannot come. So now you're married and you're not allowed to go out for dinner, or you bring your wife. I mean, so they're making up all these things, and rightly the host of this party is getting a little angry, right? He has this party, and all of a sudden no one's coming. He has food prepared, probably went to great expense, great effort, or his servants went to great effort, maybe not the host went to great effort. But anyway, and all of a sudden now there's all these crazy excuses, right? So the host says, "All right, so just go invite anybody. Just go find people off the street and bring them in." And so he does. And obviously, this is a big house, a big place, because now the servants come back and say, oh no, there's still room. We invited all those people and there's still room. And so they go out and go further and look for more people and invite them and fill the house. Right? So that those, and here is the example of that Jesus gave in the last one, saying, don't invite the usual crew, invite the ones that these people will never be able to repay you. Yet wouldn't they appreciate a nice meal? Like wouldn't they love to be invited to the rich guy's house and see what it's like to have people wait on you and I'm sure the meal was fantastic. Invite those people because that's what it's all about. Like that's the people that are gonna be accepted into my kingdom, or the ones that are willing to sit down with the lowly, the lower class, maybe some people that are sick, people that are infirmed, the poor, people that would have been never on this guest list, but yet they might be the neighbors more than some of the rich people. Joe?
But I think, but what bothers me about this is that I think the guy's embarrassed. And the word towards the end, he says, compel them to come. Well, why is he compelling them to come to a feast? He's trying to save face with the neighborhood and with the whatever status he's in. He's trying to save face, and I want to show everybody I got a big party going on. You don't want to come, well, screw you, but I'm going to have everybody. But meanwhile, slave, go out there and compel them to get in so I look good. I mean, what do you think? I mean, right? No?
Yeah, no, it definitely sounds a little bit like that. Yeah. And
we didn't compel anybody to come to the Christmas dinner. You want to come, but we're not telling them you must come.
Right. Now, did they compel him? Well, I'm sure part of it was the saving face part. I wanted this place filled so that I can say, see, I don't need all you rich people. I got friends. I got people that I can fill this place with. I don't need you.
That's what
I'm wondering if maybe the other part of the compelling was that these people might have been like, what, this is a joke?
Yeah,
Like,
that's what I think.
are we going to get there and you're going to say, what are you doing here? You have no nerve. Why would you come to this house?
Good point.
So I might have been a little of both. I don't know, that like they might have been a little suspicious that, well, I know you've had parties all the time and we've never been on the guest list before. Why would we all of a sudden be on the guest list tonight? Like, that seems odd to us, a little suspicious. So it might have been the compelling a little more of like, really, no, really, you're invited. Really, this is not a joke. This is
enthusiastically invited. Yeah, maybe
right.
they were
You are.
very
Yes, we do want you to come. I know we might not have invited you last time, but we really want you to come.
Encouraged. Yeah. Encouraged.
Yeah.
I think, also they might have felt like, other than being afraid or cautious, like what's going on, but they might have said, but this is, I can't get all dressed up. I don't have that, and whatever. And sort of embarrassment and not wanting to offend also.
Sure, I'm sure that was part of it. And also if Jesus mentioned that don't invite people that can pay you back, a little bit of that, well, I could never invite him to my house. Maybe I don't even have a house.
Right.
Maybe I have nowhere to invite him to. How can I ever repay him? I can't go because the expectation would be that I have to repay him, and I can't ever do that. So yeah, a little bit of nervousness about, now is he going to expect back from me? I can't reciprocate. It's just, I can't. So I think trepidation on the social standards, right? Do I have something to wear? I can't bring a bottle of wine or whatever they would bring maybe as a host gift. I certainly can't invite them to something people that I would be able to host. So what am I going to be thought as, an ingrate or something that I go to this nice feast and then I can't ever invite them to something else, right? Um, so it leads us to question who is invited. Again, this is all talking about who is invited into like Jesus's kingdom and into God's world. Who is invited, and are just those that can do something, those that are capable of paying back somehow, of just the big givers, just the people that can maybe work around the church or serve on council. Are they the only ones that are invited? No, everybody's invited, whether you're ever going to come back again or not, right? You and Gloria Day invited those people that come to that dinner, not saying, well, if you don't come to church first, you can't come, or you need to donate, or whatever other stipulations might put on them, right? You just said, no, here's food. You're hungry. Come eat. We want to see you. We want to welcome you in. And I would be willing to bet that the first couple of years you did that, people were a little weary. People might not have, they might have been afraid. They might have thought, what's going on there? Why all of a sudden, why are they reaching out to me? But then once
what's the
they
character?
go and they see that you didn't ask anything of them, you just treated them nicely with respect, fed them, they had a nice meal, the word gets passed around, and now people say, no, this is a safe place. This is nice. You get a nice meal. It's safe. People are friendly, there. But usually takes a little word of mouth to get people, especially in New York, we're a suspicious bunch. We are wary sometimes. So we want to be, and everybody wants to be safe. But for Jesus, this was getting people to see through his eyes, right? To see the love that he has for others and not being so judgmental, and to reach out to those who would never be thought of as the top, as those that might get the first invitation, right? Those that would always be relegated to the back seats, those that would always have to wait and see where they could sit because they didn't have a reserved seat or whatever. That those are the people that are welcomed in.
I think of this as sort of reflecting back onto that's weird enough, but the parable of the that we studied with the prodigal son. And then here, the father gives a party, and then the son, who was always there, comes and is complaining that, Dad, why are you doing this? I'm always here. I'm always working. And as the father turns around and says, yeah, but everything I have has always been yours. This has always been here for you. And now you're here. Somebody was lost is here. You're of equal preciousness, of equal love. And I'm not taking anything away from you. It's here. You're invited. But that's what I just feel that it's that kind of thing.
No,
Yeah,
they're all very related, they all, Jesus has, a few core messages, and he keeps repeating them with these various parables of getting people to understand in different ways. This one, these few are like appealing to the Pharisees and those that thought of status as the be all to the end all, right? Of where you sit, where, what placement you have, who you invite to your parties, who you think you're better than others. So this section of these parables are speaking to that, of how what people's status in society are and how they view others. And Jesus is turning it upside down, of the idea of what role status plays in God's kingdom, and shows that it doesn't play a lot. God's more interested in your heart And can you humble yourself? Can you accept others? Can you reach out to those that aren't like you? And can you welcome all? And that's who God is going to exalt, and that's who, you know, is
I,
better.
I,
But it's yeah,
I,
it's um, a lot of these are hard for us to understand because it's a different time and place, and we don't do things like the same way. But some of them are, we can relate to, and we can see how these words and these stories still relate to us and how we should treat others.
I think of brings to mind the parable of the rich man and the camel going through the eye of the needle. The rich doesn't have to necessarily mean money. It could mean just who they think they are, rich in status and rich in, some money, but
Yep.
it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to enter the kingdom of God, so.
Yeah, and I think of the Good Shepherd one that, in here he's saying, go out and compel these people to come in. Go find them and bring them in. It's the same as the Good Shepherd going to find the one lost sheep.
No, that's a good thing.
Right.
Bring everyone in.
Yeah, that's good.
Yep. Yeah. No, see, these all like build on each other, and a lot of
Yeah.
related. Yeah, a
Yeah.
lot of them are related, and that's for a reason. Like I said, anybody that's involved in marketing or in teaching knows you need to. I know when I was a pharmaceutical rep, they would tell us that doctors needed to hear the message like 7 times before they would get it.
Mhm.
Because I'd be like, I just said the same thing to them. Got to keep saying it, keep saying it, keep saying it, keep saying it, because you're in a different place every time you hear it. And, and that's again why, like, our lectionary cycle repeats every 3 years, right? Because in 3 years, the world's a different place. We have different things to bring up, different things spark us than they might have 3 years, 6 years ago, 9 years ago. And so we need to keep hearing these stories and thinking about them a little bit differently. And sometimes maybe thinking about them the same way, but just getting it through our thick skulls that this is because a lot of these messages are hard to hear, and they challenge us to think differently about how we do things. So sometimes we need to be challenged over and over again in order to finally understand and to get with it.
Yeah.
So if you throw mud at the wall, keep throwing mud at the wall, something might stick. And with your kid.
It goes with everything in life. You don't, just, you teach your kids, you don't teach your kids how to ride a bike once and then say, well, you're on your own. You go out several times, hold the bike for them, run behind them, and then gradually they learn. It's the same thing. We need to be brought along, and eventually, hopefully, we'll get it. But we need to keep practicing. That's why faith is something we need to keep growing. We need to keep practicing. It's not just go to church one and I'm good. I'm a Christian. I know it all now. We need to keep, and if we had this same discussion on these same 3 parables in a couple years, there'd be different points that would be brought out.
Right.
But that's the fun of it to me. But that's how we learn and we grow, is that each time you look at something, you think, I didn't notice that before. What is God trying to say to us here? So, anything else on these humbled, about humility and being exalted?
Mm.
All right, so we will see you next week. And we'll tackle a couple more parables. And have a good week. Stay safe. If it snows, I'm not sure what's the rest of the week is going to bring us. Who knows? But if it's
1 o'clock? 1 o'clock next week?
1 o'clock, yeah, we'll keep the 1 o'clock until Lent. I think that'll be the easiest, and then we'll switch over for
Okay.
that at Lent.
Okay. All
So
right,
we'll keep
bye
it at
now.
1.
Thank
Feel
you.
better, feel better, Janice. I hope
Oh,
you
it feels
Yeah.
great. I just have to be a good girl and not do my
Yeah.
drops and
Yeah,
stay
for
on it.
years I told
Yeah.
people what to do. Now I'm on the other side,
Right, right, right.
So be a good patient.
Yes.
Bye, everybody. Good to see. Oh,
bye
Get
now.
well.
Have a
get well,
great
feel
week.
well. Thank
Bye,
you,
everybody.
Pam.
Thanks,
Thank
Pastor.
you.
All right.